Hello there. This is CMOS, the Code Maven open source podcast and interview series. I'm your host, Gabor Sabu, and with me is Ire Adinoku. Have I pronounced it correctly?
Yes, that's quite good. So my name
That's
is Aderinokun. Yeah.
okay. So it's really nice to have you on the show, on the podcast, and to see you in the video. Um, how's everything over there?
Thank you. And thanks for having me. So I'm in Nigeria at the moment in Lagos. So it's morning and just starting my day. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I understand that you are a front-end developer and a designer mainly. Can you tell me a little bit about how do you get involved in this? How do you get started?
Yeah, so my coming into this kind of line of work is probably a bit different to how other people did it because I actually studied psychology for my undergraduate degree and then law for my master's.
Wow.
So I did something completely different to programming. But I kind of got interested in this while I was a lot younger. So maybe when I was like 13, 14. I used to play this online game which is called Neopets. I think a lot of people used to play it as well, so I'm not the only one. But it's kind of like a online role playing game in a way. And as part of the game, you could do a little bit of like HTML and just you can kind of create these pages so you can style them a bit differently. So that's kind of how I got started with it. That's how I was introduced to the concept of making a website or doing things like that. So that's kind of how I got started. And then over time, I found that I was really interested in doing this. And so on and off, I would kind of make websites for like my friends or some family. And then more recently, after I graduated from my master's, I kind of decided that, well, this is actually something that I want to do, not just as a hobby, but as a career. So I decided that I would just go for it and see how it worked out. And luckily, it worked out well because I'm still doing it and I don't have to go back to law school.
Oh, so have you graduated law school or?
Yes, I graduated almost 2 years. Yeah, 2 years ago now, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does either of these law school or learning psychology, any of these have an impact on your work or?
Um, I don't think it has an impact very directly, but it's kind of helped me in the soft skills aspect, I think. So, for example, for law, I really learned how to write well and articulate like what I'm trying to explain, how I try and explain things to people. So, whenever I write things like articles for my blog, I think that my background in law really helped me try and develop my writing skills. And psychology, I think it helps in user experience design a lot because it really allows me to kind of think, have a high level of empathy for people and try and think about how they're experiencing something. So I think it helps in that aspect. But generally, it's more impacted my soft skills in this job rather than like actually learning how to code.
Yeah, well, I guess the actual code is not. There is the psychology of the
Yeah,
computer, of course,
I
but
guess so.
but it's more of yeah, understanding how people might use your website, especially, I think. So probably UX.
Yes.
That's a major. So there might be a connection between UX and psychology, I guess.
Yeah, I think so because it's all about really trying to understand other people, and psychology is obviously also about trying to understand other people. So they really merge in that aspect. Yeah.
So these days, when you work, do you work for a company or are you freelancer? What kind?
Yeah. So I work for a company based here in Nigeria. They're called Big Cabal, and it's a media company. So at the moment, they have two publications. One is called Tech Cabal, which is the biggest news tech site in Nigeria. And then the second one is called Zikoko, and it's kind of more entertainment. It's kind of like BuzzFeed, but for Nigerian or African audiences in general. Yeah.
And so are these websites in English?
Yes, it's in English.
Okay, so there is a large. I mean, I understand that in Nigeria the common language is English, but there are lots of other languages, and how most of the people speak English? Or
Yes, you find that a lot of people speak English because there are many, many different tribes in Nigeria, and each of these tribes they have their own language. So the common language that you can kind of expect that most people will be able to speak is English or some variation of English, which is called Pidgin, which is like a little bit more low level, I guess, version of English. And so you can probably at least expect that people will be able to speak that in addition to their own native language.
oh, I understand. And in other countries, you said that it's not only for Nigeria these websites, or at least one of them, but for all more of African countries. So they're all there too have relatively good English.
Yes, we're trying to break out into other African countries as well, but obviously because we're based here, then Nigeria is our first audience.
Hmm.
But we're also trying to break out into neighboring countries like Ghana, but also places like Kenya, and just trying to break out as much as possible into markets where people are more online. So soon we'll hopefully be across the whole of Africa.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so that so that's everyone explained a little bit of how you got into computers and design and building websites. But how did you get from there to building stuff which is open source?
I think it's kind of to do with the way that I got into this field to begin with. So because it was more of a hobby for myself rather than just a job, I've always been kind of working on side projects and things all this time. So it just kind of seemed like something natural to develop into making things open source. So whenever I would work on something that I just thought was fun or interesting, I always find it really I always find it really helpful to try and make it open source and see what other people think, because that's kind of the way that I learned myself from looking at what other people have done, people putting their code online and making things open source so other people can learn from it. So as much as possible, whenever I do something, I always try to give back in that way because it was so important. It was such an important part to me learning. So I try as much as possible to contribute as well. And sometimes it's just a silly project that I work on. So it's not even something that I will make money off of. So it's just kind of fun to just show people, oh, this is how I made this like funny Slack bot or something like that.
Okay, so what would be the most interesting project that you, I don't know, most the made you the happiest to work on these open source
Maybe the
projects?
happiest. Well, that's a difficult question. I think I worked on a bunch of different things, so different things kind of hit different things for me as well. But I think one of the most fun things that I worked on was the Slack bot, which is called Khaled bot. So I think a while ago, there was kind of like a DJ Khaled phase where people were making things to do with DJ Khaled. And I think I saw someone had made like a lorem ipsum version of DJ Khaled. And it just kind of brought the idea to me because I was also like playing around with Slack bots to kind of make a DJ Khaled Slack bot. So that was really funny for me to do because I was personally like cracking up to myself while I was making it. Like when I was testing it and seeing how it worked, that was really fun to make. And so I just made this bot that pretends to be DJ Khaled. So you can talk to it and then it will kind of say things like major key and all of that. So that was really fun. And I think a lot of people enjoyed it as well. So that was fun for me. Probably one of the most fun things. Because a lot of my other projects, not all of them are just kind of random fun things. Some of them are actual utility. So they're less funny, but probably more useful because I don't think this Khaled bot is very useful.
So how can people meet this Khaled bot? Is it running somewhere now, or it's something that you download and start running for yourself, or how does it work?
Yeah, you can go to khaledbot.com. So that's another one of my obsessions buying domain names for all of these side projects. So if you go to khaledbots.com, you'll see instructions for how to install it. So you can have it hosted with, I use this hosting provider, which is called Boop, and it's free, so you can use that yourself. Or you can also just download the source and then you can run it locally yourself and maybe make some changes if you want to add things. But you can do that. So you can just add it to your Slack team, and whenever you're having conversations, you can just involve DJ Khaled into it.
Okay. Especially, I guess, when there are some tense situations, maybe, then you can just ask Khaled bot to lighten up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of my favorite features that I added kind of for this purpose was if you're just in a private conversation with the Khaled bot, you can just say, okay, just go and send something, go and like talk to this person. So if maybe someone is having an argument, you can like privately just say, okay, go and send a key to this person. And then in the middle of maybe a heated argument, DJ Khaled would just pop up and just say something. So I guess that's a good utility for the bot.
Okay. Oh, so we made it useful now. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what other projects? There's this Can I Use project, something like that, right? That's on your website?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the biggest things I've worked on because it did take a long time for me to do. But because I write a blog, so it's called Bits of Code, and I write weekly articles about front-end development. So obviously, when I'm writing about things like CSS features or JavaScript features, you kind of come across, you always want to know whether the supports for these features across all the various browsers. And so probably the most popular resource for this is this website called caniuse.com. And they actually have their data open source. So they have an API where you can just connect to and just get all the data itself. So I had the idea of creating like an embeddable widget of the information. So whenever I'm writing a blog post, I can just kind of drop, if I'm talking about like viewport units or CSS variables, I could just kind of drop in the embed so people can, while they're reading, just see what the support is for this feature at the moment. So I created that. It's probably one of the biggest things that I've created kind of by myself because I learned a lot. I learned like a lot about it because I don't think I'm that amazing at JavaScript, but I think that it's through working on things like this that you develop your skills. So it kind of taught me a lot. And so I put it up. I think you can go to caniuse.bitsofcode, or if you just Google Can I Use Embed, it should show up somewhere. So you just have this little widget that you can embed in like your blog post or wherever, and you can see the support for certain like CSS, JavaScript, HTML features.
So it can actually easily tell what kind of, if a certain feature is, so which browser supports a certain feature that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. It has something that kind of looks like a table, and it has all the major browsers. And then you can just say that you want to see what maybe the current, what the feature support is for the current versions of each browser. Or you can say you want to see like what it will be in the future or the past. And then you can just drop that there, and then it's responsive, so it would look nice on your site.
Okay, and so if it's embedded, then the other blogs that use this, you actually know what blogs are using this, right? Because you have it in your own log.
Yeah, I haven't done much tracking actually, but occasionally I do see, I think I do have some analytics on it, so I can tell. But occasionally I do just see if I'm reading an article and someone has used it, and then it's kind of like surprising to me because I just look and I'm reading an article and someone has embedded it there, and then it's kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I guess it's a really good thing when you do some work and then suddenly you encounter that someone is using it. And
exactly, because it's something that takes so much time, and I feel like maybe I might be the only one that uses it, but for me it was kind of worth it because I knew it was something that I wanted. So even if I would be the only person that uses it, it would still be useful. But it's also good to know that something that like I spend time doing, that other people kind of find it useful.
Okay, And is there actually any work that needs to be done on any of these projects, or are they finished and there's no ongoing maintenance?
For the most part, they are done. I do have a lot of ideas for how to make it better, and I think I did this maybe almost 6 months ago, so I feel like if I went back and looked at the code, I probably could make a lot of improvements on it now. But for the embed in particular, there are some things that I want to do. Like, for example, because you're embedding like it's an iframe, you can't really use it in, for example, GitHub READMEs, and that's something that some people have kind of requested, like, how can we use it for that? So I had this idea of making it like a canvas thing, so people can just download it as an image as well. So that's something that's been on my to-do list for a while, and I hope to have that feature out soon whenever I have some time. But if anyone wants to help me out with it, that would be great as well. So because it's open source, people can contribute as well. I'll be happy with that. Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's in your GitHub repository, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was also a third project, Formhack, right? That's its name?
Yes. So Formhack is say hackable, like SaaS-based form resets. So this is probably, or it is actually one of the first things that I created that was open source. So what it is a reset for forms. So
okay, so wait
a CSS
wait a second.
for forms.
If you have looked at my website, and you probably know that I have no idea about web design, and it's horrible.
Okay.
So what is a form reset? What is a reset?
Okay, let me try. Okay, so when you're creating forms in HTML, so forms and everything kind of looks different between different browsers. So if I just put like an input element which says like, okay, I want the user to be able to input text here. So if I just drop that into like the page, it's going to look different between different browsers. And so a CSS reset is basically something that you add to try to normalize the way things look across the different browsers. So because by default, different browsers might add specific CSS rules to specific elements on the page. So you want to add something, something you would add like at the very beginning of your CSS to just say, make sure everything is the same.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah. So forms in particular are quite difficult because the different browsers, they have a lot more heavy influence on the way these things look. So form elements tend to look a much more different between different browsers rather than other elements on the page. So I wanted to create a reset for forms that that's also configurable. So instead of just saying like, make sure everything is this width, or like it has no margins or no paddings or something like that, it's something that you can actually like configure. So as you're doing the resets, you're also defining what you want it to look like as well. So instead of just a basic reset, it's just something that you can, as you're doing the reset, you can style it the way that you want it to be. So that's basically what it is. Yeah.
So just to understand, I'm using Bootstrap. Is it something that that sort of can work with Bootstrap or these frameworks, or is something that's that you would use if you don't use any of these frameworks?
It's something that you would use if you don't use them, because so for Bootstrap, they've already defined what the styles are going to look like. So whereas what this is something that you kind of want to define what you want things to look like. So in Bootstrap, you can tell like what buttons always have like a certain look, or all these elements have a certain look. But with this is kind of for you to say what you want it to look like. So it's kind of more easy to change things using this rather than using something like Bootstrap, where all the things are already predefined for you. Whereas this kind of gives you the opportunity to make changes much more easily without having to write out the CSS for everything always like from scratch.
Okay. And do you have any idea how many people use this, or how many websites? Do you have any?
I don't know how many. I don't know how many people use it, because it's something that you just include in your project, and when you probably minify your CSS, I probably won't be able to tell. but it has almost 300 stars on GitHub now. I think it's like 290 something. So I guess that's how many people like it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people use it.
Yeah, I guess it's usually a lot more are using it than people just. I mean, clicking on that it's
Yeah,
an effort that
exactly.
some people make and many people don't, and many people they're not even on GitHub. They're just using stuff from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. And do you have more work on that too?
Not really. I think that has probably cooled down in terms of things that need to be done. I think if people want like more features, that's something that can be added. But for the moment, there's not really anything that needs to be fixed. It's more kind of just enhancements. Yeah.
Nice. What other plans do you have? Do you have any specific project plans? Something else?
That I'm working on right now. Um, Lately, I've been doing a bunch of work with progressive web apps, actually. So I've been playing around with how to create them and things like that. And I think about a month ago, I was giving a talk about progressive web apps, and I created this project which is called Offline FX. So it's basically like a FX exchange rate app, but it's a progressive web app, obviously. So I've been working on that, and that's been really interesting. So that's something that I kind of demoed how I made it into a progressive web app. So I put the source for that online on my GitHub as well. So you can kind of see how you can take a web application and kind of convert it to a progressive web application.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, it was really very nice to talk to you and very educational about all these projects. Do you think that there are any other subjects that we haven't touched that you would like to talk about, or anything that I haven't mentioned?
Um, you can check out my websites, or actually, if you can check out my blog, it's called Bits of Code, like I mentioned. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff I've done because I sometimes just feel like working on something interesting and just build something. And I'll usually write about it on my blog. So if you're interested in open source or just learning about kind of front end development things, you can definitely check it out because I write an article once a week, and sometimes I talk about like projects that I'm working on, or sometimes I just kind of write articles on maybe just particular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript things. So I try and like break things down that are probably seem very complex, but just the process of kind of breaking it down and like explaining exactly how things work. So that's kind of what I do with that. So you can check that out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any shout out to anyone before we finish the podcast?
Um, okay, shout out to everyone who follows me on Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm also quite active on Twitter, so if you want, you can always ask me questions. And yeah, it's a good place to interact with not just me, but I think a lot of people in this field tend to interact on Twitter. So it's also a good place to just kind of ask questions to people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I noticed that I follow you, and then I see all kind of interesting stuff there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
really, thank you for coming on the show. It was really great, and I hope to have you in a future episode again.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.